whispers in the dark. Tonight, we descend into one of the oldest shadows, hiding beneath a familiar fairy tale. You may know the story of a princess, a golden ball, a dark forest, and a talking frog waiting beside a cold stone well. But the tale that children are told is only the polished bone of something far older. The Brothers Grimm gave us the shape of it, but old villagers whispered the flesh back onto those bones by candlelight, when the wind scratched at shutters and the forest seemed to breathe. This is the tale of the Frog Prince, but not as it is told beside warm cradles and nursery fires. Tonight we begin before the princess ever drops her golden ball, before the king commands her to keep her promise, before faithful Heinrich feels the iron bands crack from his heart. Tonight we begin with the prince, in the northern edge of a green and ancient kingdom, where the forest pressed so close against the royal hunting roads that branches scraped the sides of passing carriages like crooked fingers. There stood a castle of pale stone and black timber. Its towers rose above the mist like watchful teeth. In spring, vines climbed the walls and bells rang from the chapel. In winter, frost glazed every window, and the gargoyles seemed to weep frozen tears. Within that castle lived a young prince from a neighboring realm, proud, bright, and beautiful in the careless way of those who have never known fear. His hair was the color of wet chestnuts, his skin was pale from candlelit halls, and his mouth was quick to smile when others suffered embarrassment. His name was seldom spoken in the old tale, for the curse ate it from memory. But before the enchantment, servants whispered it in fear and admiration. Prince Alaric. He was not wicked in the plain manner of murderers and thieves. He did not creep through corridors with a dagger, nor did he poison cups, nor did he order men whipped for pleasure. His cruelty was finer than that. It lived in laughter. It lived in neglect. He could look upon a hungry beggar and see only a stain upon the road. He could hear a servant sobbing and complain that the sound ruined his music. He could promise comfort to the desperate and forget the promise before the sun had lowered behind the forest. People loved him from a distance. Up close, many learned to fear the shine of him. When he rode a black horse with a silver bridle. When he feasted, he drank from a cup engraved with frogs, lilies, and little crowned beasts, a gift from his mother before she died. The cup was older than his bloodline, older even than the chapel stones. It was said to have been taken generations before from a woman of the woods, a woman who lived where the marsh began and where the roots of trees drank from black water. That woman was not forgotten by the forest. Her name was Mother Elizabeth, though no priest would say it at the altar. Some called her a witch. Some called her a healer. Some said she had once delivered half the children in the kingdom, including princes and peasants alike, and that she knew the first cries of the living and the last rattles of the dying. She lived in a hut sunk low among alder trees, beside a marsh that steamed even in winter. Around her hut, frogs gathered in such numbers that the ground seemed to pulse. They sat in bowls, in boots, under roots, on windowsills, and along the lip of her well. Their eyes shone like little wet coins in the dark. Years before Alaric was born, Mother Elizabeth had served the royal house. She had brewed medicine for fever, poultices for wounds, and dark teas for women whose grief had lodged too deep in the bones. But when the old king died, and a new court rose around polished manners and bright lies, she was driven out. Her herbs were called poison. Her knowledge was called sin. Her payment was withheld. Her sacred cup, the one engraved with frogs and lilies, was taken and placed among the treasures of the royal family. Mother Elizabeth waited. Witches are patient because forests are patient, and rot is patient, and wells remember every face that bends above them. When Prince Alaric was 20 years old, a harsh winter fell. The deer grew thin. Wolves came near the barns. Children developed coughs that rattled in their ribs like stones in wooden cups. The poor came to the castle gates begging for scraps, but the royal kitchens had been ordered to save the best stores for a great midwinter feast. The prince was to be honored that night, and nobles had arrived from 3 kingdoms. At dusk, Mother Elizabeth came to the gate. She no longer looked like a healer, not to eyes that had forgotten what healing cost. She was bent beneath a cloak clotted with mud. Her hair hung in white ropes. Her fingers were swollen at the joints, and her nails were black with peat. In one hand, she carried a staff of twisted willow. In the other, she held a bundle wrapped in a rag. The guards crossed their spears and told her to leave. She asked for the prince. They laughed. She waited until Alaric returned from hunting, his horse steaming, his cheeks flushed from cold. A dead white stag slung across the backs of 2 servants behind him. Blood dripped from the stag's mouth and spotted the snow at the castle gate. The animal's eyes were still open, glazed with a quiet accusation. Mother Elizabeth stepped into the path. "My prince," she said, and her voice was soft enough that even the horse seemed to listen. "You carry death into a house full of warmth. Give a little warmth back." Alaric looked down at her. Around him, the courtiers shifted uncomfortably, for though they despised beggars, they feared strange old women. The prince only smiled. "Warmth?" he asked. "There is the chapel. Pray hard enough, and perhaps heaven will lend you some." The nobles laughed, because princes teach rooms when to laugh. Mother Elizabeth did not move. "The cup your house stole from me sits tonight upon your feast table. Return it, and open your stores to those outside your gates. There are children whose tongues are dry as old leather. There are mothers cutting bark for broth. You have more bread than your dogs can eat." Alaric's smile thinned. He did not like being corrected in public. "That cup belongs to my family. It belonged to the marsh before your family learned to stack stone." He leaned closer from the saddle. "Then, perhaps the marsh should have kept better watch." Mother Elizabeth lifted the ragged bundle. From within, it came a faint sound, a small wet chirrup. She unfolded the cloth and revealed 3 frogs, their bodies slick and trembling in the cold. Their throats pulsed like tiny bellows. One was green with gold speckles. One was brown as mud. One was pale, almost white, with eyes like droplets of amber. "These are not for mockery," she said. "They are old witnesses. The marsh sees through them. The dead listen through them. When you drink from my cup, you drink under their eyes." Alaric laughed again, but something in the frog's stillness irritated him. Their round eyes seemed too calm, too knowing. He dismounted, took the pale frog between two gloved fingers, and held it up before the watching court. "Then let the witnesses warm themselves," he said. Before anyone could stop him, he tossed the frog into a brazier near the gate. The little creature struck the coals with a sound so small that some later swore they heard nothing at all. But Mother Elizabeth heard it. She heard the wet skin hiss. She heard the tiny limbs contract. She heard the last breath leave its soft body. Her face did not change, yet the air around the gate seemed to darken, as if the evening had leaned closer. The other frogs in her rag began to writhe. The prince wiped his fingers on a servant's sleeve. "Take the old woman away," he said. The guards seized her, but she did not struggle. She only looked at Alaric, and the smile that formed on her cracked lips was not anger. It was satisfaction, as if he had finally stepped exactly where she had laid the snare. "Remember your promise, Prince," she whispered. "I made no promise. All princes do," she said, "at birth, with their first breath, to protect what is smaller than they are, to feed what depends on them, to answer when the lowly speak. You broke that promise with laughter." Alaric turned away, but then the frogs in the marsh began to croak. Not one, not a dozen, thousands. The sound rolled from the forest beyond the gate, from the ditches, from the frozen pond, from under stones and cart wheels and snow crust. It was a low, throbbing chorus that made the horses rear and the guards pale. Even inside the castle, servants dropped trays and cooks crossed themselves. In the great hall, the old stolen cup trembled on the table, though no hand touched it. Mother Elizabeth was dragged to the road and thrown into the snow. She rose slowly, bones cracking, and lifted her black-nailed hand toward the castle. That night, the feast began beneath chandeliers of horn and candle. Musicians played. Lords carved meat. Ladies glittered in silks. Prince Alaric sat beside the king, flushed with wine, the old cup before him. Frogs and lilies curled around its rim. In the candlelight, their engraved eyes seemed wet. Outside, villagers shivered beyond the gates. Inside, Alaric lifted the cup. The wine within was dark red and spiced with cloves. He drank deeply, and at first he tasted sweetness, honey and plum and cinnamon. Then came a taste like pond water, cold and green. Then mud. Then rot. He lowered the cup. Something moved in his throat. He coughed. The courtiers did not notice at first. They were watching a jester stumble across the hall with bells on his cap. Alaric coughed again, harder. His eyes watered. His fingers tightened around the cup until the metal bent. A servant leaned close. "My prince." Alaric tried to answer, but his tongue slapped against his teeth, thick and clumsy. It felt swollen, too large for his mouth. He gagged. A sound came out of him, not a word, but a wet croak. The musicians faltered. All eyes turned. Alaric stood, knocking over his chair. Pain struck him then, sudden and absolute. It began in his hands. His fingers curled backward with sharp little pops. Knuckles bulged beneath the skin like stones being pushed from mud. His nails darkened, softened, and peeled away in ragged strips, exposing raw pink beds that gleamed in the candlelight. He screamed, but the scream broke apart into a bubbling gulp. His bones were changing. The court watched in frozen horror as his arms shrank inward, not smoothly, not magically, but as if invisible hands were twisting and grinding them down. The skin split at his wrists. Blood ran over his palms, but the blood was already thinning, turning dark and watery. His elbows snapped with the brittle crack of green wood. The sound echoed through the hall, and a lady fainted into her plate. Alaric fell to his knees. His spine arched. Each vertebra rose against his back like beads being shoved under a cloth. His fine, embroidered coat tore at the seams. His ribs clenched inward, making a cage too small for the organs inside. He felt his heart flutter wildly, then slow, then beat in a strange, heavy rhythm that seemed to answer the croaking beyond the walls. The king shouted for physicians, priests, guards, anyone. No one moved. The prince's mouth widened. The corners split. Blood streamed down his chin as his jaw unhinged and flattened. His teeth loosened one by one, dropping onto the rushes with soft white taps. His lips stretched into a lipless line, slick and trembling. His eyes bulged forward until he could see the whole hall at once, the horrified faces, the candles bending in drafts, the roast stag on the table with its open glassy stare. His skin began to blister. The blisters swelled across his cheeks, neck, and chest, each one filling with clear fluid. They burst, releasing a stink of swamp water and spoiled meat. Beneath them, his human skin sloughed away in sheets. It slipped from his shoulders and arms, wet and translucent, as though he were being peeled alive. In its place spread a slick green hide mottled with brown and gold, thin enough that veins pulsed beneath it like worms. He tried to crawl away, but his legs convulsed. His boots split, toes fused, bones shortening and twisting until his feet were broad and webbed. The spurs on his heels fell off into the spilled wine. His thighs contracted so violently that the muscles tore, healed, tore again, and reshaped into coiled haunches. Every change came with pain sharp enough to be a separate death. Still he lived. That was the witch's craft. Not to kill, to keep alive through every impossible injury, to make the body remember each insult given to the small and helpless. Alaric looked toward the doors. At the far end of the hall, beyond the trembling servants, Mother Elizabeth stood in the shadows. No guard had brought her in. No door had opened. She was simply there, mud on her hem, snow in her hair, frogs gathered at her feet. You would not hear a small voice, she said. Her words carried over every sob and prayer in the hall. So now your voice shall be small. You would not feed the hungry. So now you shall sit where flies are your feast. You burned what belonged to the marsh. So now the marsh shall claim your shape. You mocked promises. So only a promise kept in disgust shall open your prison. You will beg at a maiden's table. You will plead for a place beside her plate. You will ask to lie upon her pillow. And until she recoils from you, and still must answer for her word, you shall remain what you despised. Alaric tried to curse her. Only a long, choking croak emerged. Mother Elizabeth pointed toward the cup. Your servant Heinrich loves you with a heart too soft for this world. When he sees what you have become, grief will crush him. Let him bind it if he can. Let iron hold what flesh cannot. At that moment, far from the hall, in the prince's own kingdom, faithful Heinrich woke screaming. He had served Alaric since childhood, had taught him to ride, had carried him from a fever bed, had hidden his worst faults from harsher eyes. When the curse struck, Heinrich felt his heart swell with such grief that he believed it would burst. He called for a blacksmith before dawn and ordered 3 iron bands forged around his chest, tight enough to bruise, tight enough to hold his heart from splitting in two. Back in the feast hall, Prince Alaric shrank smaller and smaller. His crown slid from his head and rolled beneath the table. His clothes collapsed around him in a heap of velvet, blood, and loosened skin. Something wet stirred within the garments. The king stepped back, gagging. A frog crawled out. Not an ordinary frog, though its shape was low and squat, and its throat pulsed beneath its chin. Its eyes were human in their terror. A torn ribbon of royal silk clung to one hind leg, like a strip of flayed memory. Its mouth opened and closed. Father, it tried to say. Only a croak came. Mother Elizabeth bent and picked up the stolen cup. The metal had gone black. Let him be taken to the forest, she said. Let him dwell beside the deep well beneath the linden tree, where the youngest daughter of a distant king will one day play with a golden ball. There the old tale shall find him. There his crown will lie beneath mud until a promise draws it out. The candles went out all at once. When they were relit, the witch was gone. The frogs were gone. The prince was gone. Only the scraps of skin remained on the stone floor, pale and wrinkled and glistening, like a man had been emptied from himself. Years passed. In the kingdom where the curse had sent him, there stood another castle, broader and older than Alaric's home. Its walls were gray and overgrown with ivy. Its towers watched over meadows, orchards, and a vast dark forest that began just beyond the gardens. At the edge of that forest grew a great linden tree with a crown of leaves so dense that even moonlight entered green and dim beneath it. Near its roots lay a deep well made of old stone. Its mouth was round and black, and the water far below reflected nothing clearly. Children were warned never to lean too close, for the well was said to have no true bottom, only layers of cold water and older things beneath. The king of that castle was a stern widower with kind eyes gone tired from years of rule. He had several daughters, each fair in her own fashion, but the youngest was the loveliest. In the old tale, she is simply called the king's daughter, for beauty often steals names from girls as thoroughly as curses steal names from princes. Let us call her Princess Lynette, though in the palace she was known most often as the youngest princess. Lynette had hair bright as ripe wheat, braided each morning by women whose fingers smelled of lavender. Her skin was pale and clear, her gowns soft as breath, and her eyes blue as a winter sky seen through ice. She was beloved because she was beautiful, and spoiled because grief had made her father tender where he should have been firm. Servants rushed when she sighed. Musicians played when she grew bored. Her sisters envied her little, because there was something lonely about being loved as a jewel is loved, admired, guarded, and never truly understood. Her favorite treasure was a golden ball. It was small enough to rest in both palms, heavy and smooth, polished so brightly that it caught candlelight and sunlight alike. It had been made by a master goldsmith, and when Lynette threw it into the air, it flashed like a little sun. When it fell back into her hands, it made a satisfying weight, a promise that the world would return what she tossed away. Every day when the weather was fair, she walked beyond the rose gardens to the forest's edge. Beneath the linden tree, beside the deep well, she played alone with the golden ball. She threw it upward. She caught it. She threw it higher. She laughed as it rose and vanished among the leaves, then dropped back into her waiting hands. The forest watched, the well watched, and below the water, the frog prince waited. His years in the well had not passed as years pass for men. Time came to him in drips, a drop of water from a root, a beetle falling in, the moon appearing as a trembling coin far above, winter sealing the stones with ice, spring thawing the rim, autumn leaves rotting into the water and sinking past him like dead brown hands. He did not need to eat as ordinary frogs ate, though hunger still gnawed him. That was another cruelty of the curse. He felt the hunger, but it did not kill him. Flies crawled across his mouth, and instinct snapped his tongue outward before his mind could recoil. Worms slid between stones, and his body swallowed them while the buried prince within him screamed. Sometimes he slept for months in cold mud, dreaming that he had hands again. Sometimes he woke with his webbed feet tangled in white roots that seemed almost like fingers. He remembered his transformation every night. The pain did not fade. The witch had braided memory into his nerves. Whenever the moon was full, his bones ached as if they were breaking all over again. His skin felt too tight, then too loose. His mouth tasted ashes and blood. He would press himself into the mud at the bottom of the well and croak until his throat swelled, pleading with darkness, with God, with the marsh. with the dead pale frog he had thrown into the coals. No answer came. Only once each year did he hear Mother Elizabeth's voice, carried through the water like something spoken from inside his skull. A promise, Prince. Wait for a promise. So he waited. He watched generations of insects hatch and die. He watched moss thicken on the stones. He watched children come near the well and run away. But none carried the golden ball until Lynette. The first day she came, the frog prince hid beneath a ledge of stone and stared upward. Her laughter fell through the well like bells lowered into a grave. The golden ball flashed above the opening, and its light struck the water in long, trembling spears. To Alaric, buried in frog flesh, it looked like the stolen cup, like a crown, like sunlight remembered by a corpse. For weeks he watched her play. He hated her at first, not with true hatred, but with the sour jealousy of the cursed. Her soft hands, her clean dress, her careless joy. She tossed treasure into the air with no fear that it might be taken. She complained when leaves clung to her shoes. She scolded birds for startling her. She knew nothing of mud under the tongue or winter ice sealing the world above. Yet as he watched, something else stirred inside him. Shame, perhaps, recognition. She was proud as he had been proud. She was thoughtless as he had been thoughtless. Not evil, not doomed, only untested. And curses love the untested. One afternoon, the sky turned white with heat. The forest smelled of sap, damp leaves, and distant decay. Lynette came alone, wearing a gown of pale blue linen and slippers embroidered with tiny silver flowers. Her golden ball shone in her hands. She looked restless and sad, for her sisters had been invited to sit with visiting nobles, and she had been told she was too young to join them. So I must play with myself, she murmured, and threw the ball hard into the air. It rose through the linden leaves, struck a branch, and came down at an angle. Lynette reached for it, but it glanced off her fingers. The ball rolled across the roots, flashed once in the green shadow, and slipped over the rim of the well. There was no splash for a long moment. Lynette froze. Then far below, a hollow plunk echoed upward. The golden ball was gone. The princess ran to the well and looked down. The water was so deep she could see only darkness, with a faint, dull glimmer beneath it. Her reflection trembled on the black surface, pale and frightened. She began to cry, not quiet tears, but the open sobbing of a child who has always been comforted quickly and cannot understand a loss that does not answer. Her voice rang through the forest. "My ball," she cried, "my beautiful golden ball. If only I could have it back, I would give all my fine clothes, all my jewels, even my crown." At the bottom of the well, the frog prince stirred. The words entered him like hooks. A promise. He climbed, stone by stone, slick foot by slick foot. He dragged his squat body upward. The well wall was cold and furred with moss. Worms recoiled from him. His legs burned. His throat pulsed. He climbed past roots that brushed his back, past blind white insects, past cracks where old water seeped through. Above, Lynette sobbed into her hands. At last, a wet green head rose over the rim. "Princess," croaked the frog. Lynette screamed. She stumbled backward, nearly falling among the roots. The frog blinked at her with bulging golden brown eyes. He was hideous to her, though he had once turned heads in every court he entered. His skin gleamed with slime. His mouth was wide and soft. His throat swelled and shrank as if something inside it were breathing separately. Mud clung to his back. One eye held a strange human sorrow that made him worse to look upon, not better. "Do not be afraid," he said, though his voice scraped like wet leather over stone. "Why are you weeping so bitterly?" Lynette pressed a hand to her chest. "You speak." "Yes, you are a disgusting thing." The words struck him, but he had earned worse. "I am what I am," said the frog. "Tell me why you weep." "My golden ball has fallen into the well," she said, wiping her tears, though revulsion twisted her face. "No one can reach it." "I can," said the frog. Lynette stared. The forest seemed to lean closer. "If you bring it back," she said quickly, "I will give you anything. My pearls, my jewels, my dresses, even the golden crown I wear at feasts." The frog remembered Mother Elizabeth's voice. "I do not want your pearls," he said, "nor your jewels, nor your fine dresses, nor your golden crown. But if you will love me, and let me be your companion and playmate, and let me sit beside you at your little table, and eat from your little golden plate, and drink from your little cup, and sleep in your little bed, then I will dive below and bring your golden ball back to you." Lynette recoiled. Her lips parted in disgust. The thought of that wet creature beside her plate, its throat swelling near her food, its slime on her cup, its cold body near her pillow, filled her with horror. Yet she also thought of her ball glittering at the bottom of the well. She thought of how her father would comfort her if she returned weeping, but comfort would not bring the ball back. She thought of how easily a promise made to a frog could be forgotten. "Yes," she said. "Yes, if you bring my ball back, all that shall be as you say." The frog looked at her for a long moment. "Promise, I promise." The word fell into the well. Something beneath the water answered, with a sound like chains moving in mud. The frog turned and dropped from the rim. Lynette gasped as he vanished into the darkness. He struck the water below with a slap, then sank. Down he swam, deeper than any ordinary frog would go. The well widened beneath the surface into an ancient stone throat. Roots dangled like drowned hair. Old coins lay in the silt. Bones, too. Small animal bones. Bird bones. Something that might have been a child's finger bone, though perhaps it was only a twig polished white by water. The golden ball glimmered at the bottom. As the frog reached it, the mud around the ball stirred. Pale shapes unfolded from the silt, the ghosts of promises broken before Lynette's, promises made by frightened children, drunk men, false lovers, dying kings. They had no faces, only mouths. They whispered in bubbles. She will leave you. All promises rot. Stay below. You belong here. The frog clamped his wide mouth around the golden ball. It was too large, stretching his jaws until pain shot through his skull. He kicked upward. The whispers followed, tugging at his legs with boneless fingers. One slipped into a tear in his skin and wriggled there like cold smoke. He kicked harder. His lungs burned, though the curse would not let him drown. At last he broke the surface and climbed again, dragging the golden ball with him. When he reached the rim, Lynette was waiting, pale and anxious. He spat the ball onto the grass. It rolled to her slipper, bright and perfect. Lynette snatched it up with a cry of joy. For one moment, sunlight returned to her face. Then she looked down at the frog. He was panting. Mud streamed from him. His mouth had split at one corner from the weight of the ball, and a thread of dark, watery blood slid down his chin. "Take me with you," he said. Lynette stepped back. "Princess," he croaked, "you promised." But she had already gathered her skirts. The golden ball clutched against her breast. She turned and ran toward the castle. Her slippers flashed through the grass. Her braid flew behind her like a banner. The frog watched her go. Something in the forest sighed. He followed. It took him a long time. His body was not built for roads. Every hop jarred him. Gravel cut the soft webbing of his feet. Birds circled overhead, curious and hungry. Once, a fox stepped from the underbrush and lowered its sharp face. The frog froze beneath its gaze, seeing reflected there the helpless terror of the pale frog he had burned. The fox sniffed him, whined, and fled, as if it had smelled the witch. By twilight, the frog reached the castle gate. The guards did not see him slip through. He crossed the courtyard beneath wagon wheels and horses' hooves, each shadow a threat, each boot a tower that might crush him. Kitchen boys shouted nearby. Dogs barked and strained at their chains. One snapped at him, jaws clacking shut so close that its hot breath rolled over his back. The frog squeezed beneath a drain grate and crawled through a channel slick with grease, dirty water, and scraps of meat. At last, he reached the great hall. Inside, the king dined with his daughters. Torches burned in iron brackets. Tapestries covered the walls. Servants moved quietly with platters of roasted fowl, sugared fruit, brown bread, and wine. Princess Lynette sat near her father, her golden ball hidden beneath a fold of her gown, and tried not to think of the well. Then came a sound at the door. Plip! Something wet struck the stone beyond the threshold. The princess stiffened. Again came the sound. Plip! Then a voice, low and rough. King's daughter, youngest one, open to me. The hall fell silent. Lynette's spoon clattered against her plate. The king turned to her. His beard was silver, his brow heavy, his eyes sharp despite his age. What is that at the door? Nothing, Lynette whispered. The voice came again. Princess, youngest princess, open to me. Do you not remember what you said beside the cool well water, under the linden tree?" Her sister stared. Servants crossed themselves. The king's face darkened. "What did you promise?" Lynette trembled. Shame and anger rose together in her throat. She wanted to lie, but her father's gaze held her in place. "My golden ball fell into the well," she said. "A frog brought it back." "A frog?" "Yes, father." "And what did you promise him?" Her voice lowered. "That he might be my companion, sit beside me, eat from my plate, drink from my cup, and sleep in my bed." A murmur passed through the hall, like wind over graves. The king did not smile. He did not comfort her. His face became the face of a ruler, not a father. "What you have promised, you must perform," he said. "Go and open the door." Lynette looked at him in disbelief. "But father, it is a vile creature." The king's eyes hardened. A promise does not become less binding because the one who receives it is lowly. Something old moved in those words, older than the king, older than the castle. Perhaps Mother Elizabeth heard them wherever she waited, and perhaps she smiled. Lynette rose, shaking. She crossed the hall while everyone watched. At the door, she paused, hand hovering over the latch. From the other side came a wet scrape, a soft breathing, a swollen throat pulsing in darkness. She opened the door. The frog sat on the threshold. Torchlight made his slime shine. His eyes reflected the hall, the table, the princess, the king. He looked smaller than Lynette remembered, and somehow more horrible. There was mud in every crease of his body. His split mouth had dried black at one corner. A pale worm clung to his back, writhing until it dropped onto the stone. Lynette gagged. The frog looked up. "Lift me," he said. "I cannot climb the steps alone." She did not move. The king spoke from the table. "Lift him." So the princess bent. Her fingers hovered above the frog, then closed around him. His skin was cold and soft, yielding horribly beneath her touch. Slime coated her palms. She could feel his heart beating through his thin body, slow and heavy, like a trapped thing knocking from inside a wall. She carried him to the table and set him near her plate. "Closer," he said. Her face twisted. "Closer, princess, beside you." The king watched. Lynette moved him beside her golden plate. The frog's throat pulsed. He looked at the bread, the fruit, the meat shining with fat. Long ago, Alaric had eaten from gold, while others starved outside his gates. Now he sat low beside a princess's dish, waiting for what disgust would grant him. "I am hungry," he said. Lynette picked up a piece of bread and dropped it before him. "From your plate," said the frog. Her eyes filled with furious tears. She tore a piece from the bread on her own plate and placed it before him. He ate. His mouth opened wide, too wide, and the bread vanished with a wet sound. Lynette turned away, covering her mouth. "Drink," said the frog. She pushed a cup toward him. "Your cup." The king said nothing. He did not need to. Lynette lifted her small golden cup and held it near the frog. He placed his front feet upon the rim. His slick toes slid against the metal. He drank, and some of the wine spilled down his pale throat. In the torchlight, for one terrible instant, Lynette imagined that the frog's eyes were not frog eyes at all, but a man's eyes trapped behind swelling flesh. She nearly dropped the cup. The meal continued in a silence broken only by the frog's breathing and the faint scrape of knives. Lynette's sisters looked away. Servants stared at the floor. The king ate slowly, as though each bite were judgment. When supper ended, Lynette rose at once, but the frog called after her. "I am tired. Carry me to your room." "No," she whispered. The king stood. "You made your promise." Her fear turned to rage then, hot and clean. She wanted to stamp her foot, to scream that she was a princess and not a nursemaid to a filthy creature. But the hall waited. Her father waited. The frog waited. So she picked him up again. The journey to her chamber was worse than the meal. The corridors seemed longer than ever before. Candles guttered in wall sconces. Portraits of dead queens and kings watched from the shadows. The frog rested in her hands, heavy despite his size, leaving a trail of dampness across her skin. At the door of her room, Lynette hesitated. Her chamber was the softest place in the castle. White curtains hung around her bed. A carved chest held her ribbons. A silver mirror stood near the window. Lavender and rose petals scented the air. Moonlight lay across the floor in pale squares. The frog looked around with eyes that seemed too aware. "Put me on your pillow," he said. "No, princess, no." She set him on the floor instead. The frog began to crawl toward the bed. Each movement left a shining smear on the polished wood. He reached the carved leg and tried to climb, but his wet feet slipped. He fell once, twice. Each time, he hit the floor with a soft slap. "Lift me," he said. Lynette backed away. Her disgust had become panic. The walls seemed too close. The frog's mouth opened and shut. His throat pulsed. The idea of that cold body near her face, beside her hair, touching the place where she slept, filled her with a horror so deep that it felt like madness. "Lift me," he said again, and now there was desperation in his voice. Not command, not cruelty, a plea scraped raw by years in darkness. "Please." But Lynette did not hear the plea. She heard only the wet voice. She saw only the slime. She smelled only the well. "You horrible thing," she whispered. The frog looked up at her. Something in his eyes broke her anger into something uglier. She remembered her promise and hated him for making her remember it. She remembered her father's command and hated him for obeying it. She remembered the golden ball safe in her chest and hated the bargain that had returned it. "I wish you were back in your well," she said. The frog flinched. In the oldest telling, the princess does not kiss the frog. She does not soften. She does not learn gentleness by lowering her lips to his cold head. No, She seizes him in fury and throws him against the wall. And so Lynette did. She snatched the frog from the floor. He was slick in her hands, squirming once in terror. She lifted him high and hurled him with all the force of her disgust. He struck the stone wall beside the bed. The sound was small and dreadful, not the crack of a plate, not the thud of a thrown cushion. A wet, bursting sound, followed by a gasp that was almost human. The frog fell to the floor. Lynette stood frozen, chest heaving. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the frog began to change. The body on the floor convulsed. Its back arched, legs kicking against the wood. A seam opened along its spine, thin at first, then widening with a red glisten. Lynette screamed and stumbled backward as the frog's skin split from neck to haunches. Something pale pressed from within. The curse did not release gently. It reversed itself. The frog's limbs stretched with sounds like ropes snapping. Webbed feet tore apart into toes. Tiny bones lengthened too quickly beneath the skin, splitting it in places, so that blood and clear fluid streaked across the floor. The wide mouth shrank, teeth pushing through gums in a rush of ivory and blood. The bulging eyes sank inward, lids forming over them like curtains drawn across a nightmare. The throat flattened. The green hide peeled away in strips, wet and translucent, revealing human skin beneath, raw and trembling. Lynette screamed for her father, for servants, for God. The thing on the floor screamed too. It was no longer a croak. It was a man's scream, hoarse and ragged, filled with years of trapped agony released all at once. His spine straightened, his ribs expanded, his fingers clawed at the floorboards, nails forming pink and soft at their tips. Hair spilled damply across his brow. The last of the frog's skin clung to his shoulders like a drowned cloak, then tore loose and collapsed beside him. Where the frog had fallen lay a prince. He was naked, shivering, and streaked with slime and blood. His body was lean from enchantment, his face pale, his eyes wide with pain and disbelief. Around his throat remained a faint green stain, like a bruise left by another life. For several moments he could not speak. He could only breathe, each breath sounding like it scraped through broken glass. The door burst open. The king entered with guards and women carrying candles. They found the princess pressed against the bedpost. The prince collapsed on the floor, and the shed frog's skin lying between them like something cut from a grave. One guard lifted his sword. "Stop," said the king. The prince raised his head. Recognition moved through him slowly. Not recognition of faces, but of shape, of height, of air entering human lungs. "I was enchanted," he whispered. "A wicked witch cast me into the well." The king stared. "Who are you?" The prince closed his eyes. For a terrible moment, he could not remember. The curse had gnawed at his name for years. Then it returned, faint and painful. "Alaric," he said. "Prince Alaric of the Eastern Marches." The king knew the name. Everyone knew the story of the prince who had vanished from a feast years before, leaving only rumors of witchcraft and a grieving servant bound in iron. Lynette looked at the man on her floor. Her hands still felt the frog's cold body. Her ears still held the sound of him striking stone. She had wanted to be rid of him, not to free him. Yet here he was, beautiful in the ruined way of a statue dragged from a river. Alaric looked back at her. In his gaze there was gratitude, yes, but also horror. He remembered being thrown. He remembered the wall rushing toward him. He remembered the bursting pain, and beneath it, the shattering of the curse. Some enchantments are broken by tenderness, some by obedience, some by revulsion so honest that it tears through lies. Mother Elizabeth had not demanded love. She had demanded a promise kept to its bitter end, and a pride met with pride. The king ordered physicians to tend the prince. They washed mud from his body, though the smell of the well lingered for days. They wrapped him in linen and laid him in a chamber near the chapel. All night he cried out in sleep, his hands clawing at his throat, his legs kicking as if swimming upward through black water. Princess Lynette did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the smear on the wall where the frog had struck. Servants scrubbed it before dawn, but the mark remained, dark in the stone, shaped almost like a small body with outstretched limbs. By morning, news had spread through the castle. The frog was a prince. The promise had been kept. The youngest princess had freed him. Songs were already forming in the mouths of servants who preferred wonder to terror. But old stories do not end when bodies change. 2 days later, a carriage arrived from Prince Alaric's kingdom. It was black, with wheels banded in iron. 4 horses drew it, their manes braided with mourning ribbons long faded by weather. At its front sat Heinrich, faithful servant of the prince. Heinrich had aged during the curse. His hair had gone gray at the temples. His face was lined by grief and sleeplessness. Around his chest, beneath his coat, 3 iron bands held his heart from breaking. They had been forged so tightly that he moved with stiffness, and every breath seemed to hurt. Yet, when he saw Alaric standing alive in the castle courtyard, Heinrich fell to his knees and wept. "My prince," he said, "my dear master." Alaric embraced him, and as he did, a sound rang through the courtyard. Crack! Everyone turned. Heinrich gasped, clutching his chest. 1 iron band had split. The broken pieces fell beneath his coat with a dull clang. "Do not fear," said Heinrich, laughing through tears. "It is only a band from my heart. I had 3 forged around it when you were changed into a frog, for grief was too great to bear." Alaric touched the old servant's shoulder. Shame moved through him like a blade. Heinrich had loved him enough to bind his own heart, while Alaric had once loved nothing that did not reflect him. A wedding was arranged, because that is how courts mend terror into order. The king declared that Princess Lynette had given her promise, and the prince, now restored, was a worthy match. Lynette did not protest. whether from duty, guilt, fear, curiosity, or some beginning of compassion. Even she did not know. But on the morning before they were to depart for Alaric's kingdom, Lynette went alone to the well. Mist lay low over the grass. The linden leaves stirred, though no wind blew. She carried no golden ball. Her hands were bare. At the well she looked down. The water was black. "I kept my promise," she said, though her voice trembled. "I did what was required." From below came a soft sound. Croak. Lynette stepped back. Another frog climbed onto the inner stones of the well. Then another. Then 5. Then 10. Their wet eyes fixed on her. The air smelled of marsh. A voice spoke behind her. "Did you?" Lynette turned. Mother Elizabeth stood beneath the linden tree. She looked older than any living thing should look, and less frail than any old woman ought to be. Her cloak hung in dark folds. Frogs clustered around her feet. One pale frog sat on her shoulder, its amber eyes bright as candle flames. Lynette could not move. "You are the witch," she whispered. "I am many things. Witch is the name given by those who fear debts. You cursed him. He cursed himself. I gave the curse a shape." Lynette swallowed. "Why are you here?" Mother Elizabeth looked toward the castle. "Because curses leave stains. A prince may regain his skin and still carry the swamp inside him. A princess may keep a promise and still not understand it. I did what my father commanded. Obedience is not the same as understanding." Lynette's fear sharpened into anger. "He was hideous. He demanded my bed. He demanded what you promised. He tricked me. You bargained with him because you wanted your toy." The words struck cleanly. Lynette looked away. Mother Elizabeth stepped closer. Her feet made no sound in the grass. "Do you know why he became a frog?" "He said you enchanted him." "I did. After he burned a creature that had done him no harm. After he mocked hunger outside his gates. After he laughed at vows older than crowns." Her eyes glittered. "He was not the first royal child to think small lives weigh nothing. He will not be the last." Lynette looked toward the well. The frogs watched her. "What do you want from me?" Mother Elizabeth smiled, and Lynette saw that her teeth were not all human. Some were small and pointed. Some looked like chips of bone. "Nothing yet." The words chilled her more than any threat. The witch bent and touched the golden grass with one black nail. A dark, wet spot spread beneath her finger, as if marsh water rose from the earth. "Remember the sound he made when he struck the wall," she said. "Remember that freedom sometimes comes through pain, and pain does not become goodness merely because it opens a door. Remember what you felt when you held him. Disgust can become cruelty very quickly, princess. You stand nearer to him than you think." Lynette wanted to deny it, but the memory of the frog in her hands returned. The force with which she had thrown him. The satisfaction, brief and fierce, before the horror. Mother Elizabeth turned to leave. "Will you curse me?" Lynette whispered. The witch paused. Not today. Then she vanished among the trees, and the frogs slipped back into the well one by one. That afternoon, Lynette and Alaric departed in Heinrich's carriage. As the wheels rolled over the stones, a second crack rang out. Heinrich smiled. Another band, my prince. My heart is lighter still. The road led through the forest. Tall trees crowded close, their leaves whispering overhead. Lynette sat across from Alaric in the carriage. He wore dark velvet and a cloak lined with fur. He looked every inch a prince again, yet his hands shook when water splashed in ditches beside the road. For a long while, neither spoke. At last Lynette said, "Did you deserve it?" Alaric looked at her. "The curse," she said. "Did you deserve what she did?" Outside, branches scratched the carriage roof. Alaric's face tightened. No one deserves to feel their bones broken slowly. Lynette lowered her gaze. "But I deserved judgment," he said. "I deserved to be made to see what I refused to see." The witch chose pain because pain was the only language I had not mocked. Lynette listened. "I burned a frog," he said, voice thick. "A small, pale thing. It made almost no sound. That is what haunts me most. Not the pain, not the well, the smallness of the sound. I had thought cruelty should announce itself loudly. But sometimes it is only a little hiss in the coals, and everyone laughs, and the world continues." Lynette looked at her hands. "I threw you," she whispered. "Yes, I wanted to hurt you. Yes, do you hate me?" Alaric looked out the carriage window. The forest flowed past, dark and endless. "I do not know yet." It was the most honest answer either of them had ever heard. The carriage struck a rut, and from Heinrich's chest came the third and loudest crack. The final iron band broke. Heinrich cried out, but this time with joy. The horses tossed their heads. The carriage seemed to lighten. Even the forest gave way to a road washed in late sunlight. In many tellings, that is where the story ends. The prince restored. The princess wed Heinrich freed of his iron grief. The carriage rolling home toward a kingdom ready to rejoice. But horror knows that endings are only doors closing in one room, while another room waits in darkness. Prince Alaric returned to his castle changed, though not enough at first. People cheered from the road. Bells rang. Servants wept. The old feast hall had been scrubbed clean years before, but those who remembered still avoided the stones where his skin had fallen. The stolen cup was gone, taken by Mother Elizabeth the night of the curse, and no craftsman had been willing to make another like it. Alaric opened the grain stores before entering the castle. That was the first sign. He ordered bread given to the poor, firewood sent to widows, and physicians paid to tend sick children. The court praised Princess Lynette for softening him, though she knew better. The well had softened nothing. It had hollowed him. Into that hollow, conscience had begun to grow. Yet the curse had left marks no physician could treat. At night, Alaric woke crouched on the floor, throat swollen from croaking. He could not bear flies in a room. He could not drink from deep cups, only shallow bowls where he could see the bottom. If rain fell too hard, he shook until Heinrich sat beside him and spoke gently until dawn. Sometimes Lynette found him in the garden pond, standing waist deep in water, his eyes blank, his fingers spread as if waiting for webs to grow between them again. And Lynette had her own haunting. Whenever she touched her golden ball, she felt slime on her palms. Whenever she heard laughter at another's shame, her stomach turned. Sometimes she dreamed that she was back in her chamber, lifting the frog again and again, hurling him against the wall. But in the dream, he did not become a prince. He burst. His small body opened, spilling black water, worms, and tiny bones across the floor. Then the mess would gather itself and whisper in her own voice. A promise is easy when the promised thing stays beautiful. The marriage came in autumn. The chapel was filled with candles. Lynette wore white velvet and a crown of pearls. Alaric stood beside her, pale but steady. Heinrich watched from the front, one hand pressed over his unbound heart. Outside, beyond the stained glass windows, rain fell softly. When the priest asked if they would keep faith, both hesitated, not long enough for others to notice, long enough for the forest to hear. "I will," said Alaric. "I will," said Lynette. Far away in the marsh, frogs began to croak. Years later, people said they became good rulers. Not gentle in the foolish way of people who have never been harmed. Not perfect, never perfect, but watchful. They listened when beggars spoke. They punished cruelty disguised as sport. They taught their children that promises were living things, and that living things could turn monstrous when neglected. The old well beneath the linden tree was sealed by order of the king, Lynette's father. Great stones were dragged over it. Mortar filled the cracks. A cross was set above the mouth. Still, on wet nights, servants said they heard something beneath the sealed stones. Croaking, scratching, a soft voice asking to be let in. Mother Elizabeth was seen only once more. It happened when Alaric and Lynette's first child was born, a daughter with dark hair and solemn eyes. Near midnight, as the storm bent trees against the castle windows, the nurse found an old woman standing beside the cradle. Frogs sat along the sill, though the chamber was 3 floors above the ground. The nurse could not scream. Her tongue lay heavy in her mouth. Mother Elizabeth looked down at the baby. Her face was unreadable. "Small thing," she whispered. "May they remember what they owe you." She placed a tiny carved frog beside the cradle, made of black wood polished smooth by many hands. Then she turned to the nurse. "Tell them this. A curse is not always punishment. Sometimes it is a mirror. Sometimes it is the last mercy offered before the soul rots beyond saving." By the time the nurse found her voice, the witch was gone. The child grew. The carved frog remained in the nursery. No one dared throw it away. And in the old castle of Princess Lynette's father, beneath the sealed well, the darkness deepened. For the thing about wells is that they do not forget what falls into them. Balls, tears, promises, bodies, names. They hold everything in cold water, polishing each memory smooth and round until one day, a careless hand drops something precious, and the old darkness has a reason to speak again. So when you hear the sweet nursery tale of the princess and the frog, remember what sits beneath it. Remember the prince whose bones broke in a candlelit hall. Remember the witch with mud on her hem and grief sharpened into justice. Remember faithful Heinrich, whose heart had to be bound in iron because love itself was too heavy to survive. Remember the king who understood that a promise made to something lowly is still a promise. Remember the princess who did not kiss the frog, but threw him, and by that violence opened the prison she had agreed to enter. And should you ever walk alone at the edge of a forest, where a linden tree bends over an old stone well, and should you carry something golden, something beloved, something that catches the light, hold it tightly. If it falls, do not bargain carelessly with the voice below, for the water is deep, the frogs are listening, and some promises climb after you. Thank you for joining me for tonight's dark retelling of the Frog Prince, drawn from the old bones of the Brothers Grimm and dragged through the mud of something far more dreadful. If this tale kept you listening in the dark, leave a like, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments which classic story should be unearthed next. Until then, keep your windows latched, keep your promises carefully, and never laugh at small things suffering in the fire. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine. Whispers of